So you guys are being introduced to an important topic this week, and that is debugging of code, particularly debugging of JavaScript code using the developer tools inside of the Chrome browser. And you have a debugging activity with multiple videos in there. I do recommend that you watch those videos first before you watch this screencast, but I wanted to also provide a little bit of a practical example and a practical example of how to do some debugging. And I thought it'd be useful to do it in some code that you've already seen. This here is the document we talked about in the past screencasts when we were talking about conditional statements. Here's the first if statement, the if else statement, and so on and so forth. This is the one that had the 4 different buttons in it. And I've introduced a few errors in here so that we can do a little bit of troubleshooting. And so let's jump straight into that. I'll go ahead and launch this code in Chrome. And I'm testing my code, and as you remember from the previous screencast, if I were to put a 1 in here and hit this button, then I should get a pop-up box that tells me I'm in the first if statement. And I click on it and nothing works. And I'm frustrated. I know this is supposed to work. I wrote the code myself. Of course, the code is perfect because I wrote it. And I don't know why it's not working. But I remembered about developer tools, and so let's go in and do some exploring. Right away you'll notice, or at least you should, first thing you should look at is down in the bottom right hand corner, and you'll notice that I have 4 different errors that have been generated. And you can go ahead and just click on those errors and it pops up the console, which gives you an idea of what errors are happening. Now we happen to have 4 of the same error happening, probably an error that's generated as I push the button up here. You'll notice that that is the case, as every time I click the button a new error is generated. And it says if statement is not defined. And it sounds familiar. I know I've created a method called if, or a function called if statement, but I know I've created it. I don't know why it's not defined. So the next step you'd probably want to do is go into sources and scroll through the code a little. You can hide that console again if you want to be able to see more of your code, and you can just kind of scroll through, because developer tools will make it nice and obvious for you to spot where the error is happening. Now down here it's in my button statement, and it's saying that this if statement that I've called in my onClick is not defined, but I know I've defined it. It's up here. So one of the things I'm going to look at is compare to make sure I'm doing everything correctly. Here's my function if statement, and I'm calling if statement in the onClick. But if I look closely, I notice that I've misspelled if statement in the onClick, whereas up here I spelled it with 1 F. Down here I accidentally spelled it with 2 F's. So that's going to cause a problem, because this onClick is trying to call a method that doesn't exist or is not defined. So I can come back into my code and find where I have that problem down here in the onClick, and I'll delete that, save it, go back to Chrome, and we'll relaunch it and try again. I'm going to hit the if statement. Still not working, so something else must be wrong. Same thing, we'll start scrolling through the code. And now I find that my problem is up inside my method, or up inside my function, and it's on this input. So I start to check this line. The next thing you want to do is to check this line to see what's going on. So input, well, I've declared input and I've initialized it to 0, so everything looks good there, so that's not the problem. Parse int, I've spelled that right. I've got a capital I. Document is spelled right. Get element by ID, looks like it's right. I've got my ID that I'm referencing for my text field there, and then my dot value, which is going to pull the information out of that's entered into the text field. And everything is looking okay to me, so I don't know what's going on in here. But typically it's probably going to be stuff that I added, especially if all of this standard stuff is done correctly and spelled correctly. That's something you ought to look closely at. Then most likely the thing that I added is going to be what's wrong. So let's go verify that I'm calling, or that I indeed have a text field called this down there that I'm wanting to hit. So I'll come down and find my text field, which is right here, and its ID is text field, which is what I thought I wrote. So we'll go back and just double check, and oh, there's a problem right there. I mistyped and put text fields. So we'll come back into the code, find that place, fix that, save it again, and then I can refresh this and try one more time, and I hit F, I hit the if, and my JavaScript button pops up, and I've successfully debugged my code.